Greetings everyone. Let's make a double batch of homemade New York-style sesame bagels. I like to whip these up while my husband is asleep so I can surprise him when he wakes up. I start out by placing 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast and 4.5 teaspoons of table sugar into my standing mixing bowl with the dough hook attached. In a separate medium-sized mixing bowl, I then measure out 3.5 cups of bread flour and whisk it with 1 teaspoon of salt. Next, I measure out 1 1/4 cup of water and heat in my microwave briefly until the heated water reaches 105 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want the water to be any warmer. I then pour about 1/2 of the heated water over the yeast and sugar in my mixing bowl. Don't stir just yet, let it sit for about 3 to 5 minutes until the yeast starts to foam up. Next, I turn the mixer on low and combine the water, yeast, and sugar for a few seconds. I then pour in about 1/2 of the salted bread flour and have my mixer blend for about a half minute. I then pour in the remainder of the heated water and the remainder of the salted flour. I turn my mixer back on and let the dough paddle finish combining the ingredients and then do its kneading magic for about 8 to 10 minutes. I add a generous squeeze of extra virgin olive oil to an extra large mixing bowl and spread it around to coat the interior. I remove my dough ball from the stand mixer and do a little hand tucking to ensure I make it as round and smooth as possible. I turn the dough ball upside down and swirl it against the oiled bowl to ensure all sides of my dough ball get a light oil coating. Next, I cover my bowl with foil, plastic wrap, or a clean dish towel. I set the bowl aside, and I then make a second recipe of my dough. I do this because I don't want to break my mixer by having it knead a double-sized dough ball. When my second dough ball has completed its kneading process, I add it to my oiled bowl right up against the first dough ball, and I tightly recover the bowl. I then place my covered bowl, containing both dough balls, into a slightly heated oven and I set the timer for 1 hour. When my timer goes off, I uncover my bowl, punch down the expanded dough balls, and then I rework as one large dough ball by tucking and smoothing. I then recover the bowl and let the dough rest for 10 more minutes. Oh my, I think I got distracted. My dough ball got so big it pushed the foil right off the top. No worries. I just punched down to remove the air. Now it's time to form individual bagel-sized dough balls. I like to use a kitchen scale to ensure all my bagels are the same size. This helps ensure portion control and baking uniformity. I break off pieces of dough and aim for 3.5-ounce dough balls, removing or adding little bits to ensure the weight is just right. This double recipe should yield 16 bagels, 3.5 ounces each. I then do my hand tucking to smooth out the top of the bagel, and then I start pushing bottom of the bagel dough towards the center where the bagel hole will eventually be formed. I flour the surface of some parchment paper that I've laid out on my counter, and I repeat my dough ball weighing and tucking until I get 16 perfectly sized bagel doughs. I then dust the tops of the dough balls with a bit of flour and cover them with plastic wrap. I use utensils to weigh down the plastic wrap to reduce air gaps. These dough balls should now rest for 30 minutes. While the dough balls are resting, I fill a wide stock pot with water a little more than halfway. I place it on the stove top on a high heat to bring the water to a boil. I add in 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. The bagels will get boiled first before they are baked, and the added brown sugar will help give them more color and shine when done. Okay, the final rest time is over. It's time for my little dough balls to be formed, boiled, topped and baked. While my pot of water is coming to a boil, I form my first several dough balls into bagels. Watch how I use my thumbs to poke a hole in the top center of my dough, while using my other fingers to smooth the dough on the back side of the bagel, while turning the bagel for evenness and stretching out the center hole. Let's slow it down and do another one. Center poke. Smooth the bottom while turning the bagel, and gently stretching. Now let's get 2 air-bake cookie sheet pans covered in parchment paper, and we'll generously sprinkle on some cornmeal. I had white cornmeal on hand, but I recommend you use yellow cornmeal. It provides more contrast on the bottom of the baked bagels. My water is boiling, and I'll place 3 to 4 bagels in the pot at a time, ensuring the smoother tops of the bagels are face up. I let the bagels bathe in the boiling water for 2 minutes on each side. Boiling the bagel dough before baking gives bagels their distinctive and necessary chewy quality. After the first 2 minutes, watch how I gently turn over each bagel using a slotted spatula or spoon. Now the bottoms of the bagels are facing up. Now that the bagels have completed their 4-minute bath, I flip each bagel so the top side is facing up once again and carefully transfer the wet bagel to my parchment and cornmeal covered air-bake pan. The cornmeal will adhere to the bottom of the bagel, which adds texture, flavor, and helps ensure the bagels do not stick to the baking surface. Next, I form another batch of bagels, place them, top side up, into the boiling water and set the timer for 2 minutes. During those first 2 minutes, I brush a coating of egg onto the tops of my previously boiled bagels, and then sprinkle on my sesame seeds, and lightly pat them down. I usually squeeze 8 bagels onto each of my air-bake pans, which is half of my double batch. I flip over the second batch of bagels to boil bottom side up and set the timer for 2 minutes. I then ensure my oven baking rack is in the middle of my oven, and I set the oven to preheat at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. When the oven reaches 425 degrees, I place my first pan of bagels into the oven and let them bake for an initial 15 minutes. At the 15-minute mark, I watch them carefully until I see they've turned golden brown on top and are ready to come out. I use tongs to carefully remove the baked bagels from the hot air-bake pan to a cooling rack on my counter. Oh my, they look and smell absolutely scrumptious. This is my first batch of bagels. I repeat the process of shaping, boiling, topping, and baking to get the remaining bagels baked. Wow! My husband will have a huge smile on his face when he wakes up and sees these. He says these are the best bagels he has ever eaten. I have to agree, and I grew up eating the best bagels from New York, so I feel a great amount of pride having perfected this recipe over the years. I made myself a delicious breakfast sandwich to reward my hard work. Absolutely delicious. Once all the bagels have cooled completely, I wrap them individually in plastic wrap and place them in gallon-size freezer bags. We treat ourselves to a bagel breakfast on weekends, taking out a couple of bagels to defrost on the counter while we have our first cup of coffee. I hope you'll try this recipe. Enjoy!